All right. Hello. Welcome, everyone, to Critique Revolve, Rayman Digital's exclusive movie, television, and media podcast. This episode, we will be discussing Christopher Nolan's latest film, Oppenheimer. I'm Michael Flores, your host, and with me today is Ryan Denton. Hello.
Hey, how's it going?
All right. Now, there's been a lot of talk about this film, from its moral implications and its cultural significance to Nolan's comments that there will be no CGI utilized in the construction of Oppenheimer. So there's a lot to sort through. This is one of those movies that it's hard to pinpoint one specific area of interest to discuss. So Ryan and I are going to do our best to give an overall presentation of our thoughts on the film. Now, the movie is 3 hours long, so be sure to empty your bladders.
Yes, take a pee first.
Because I nearly died.
Yeah, Mike for the last hour almost died. I saw him squirming in his seat.
Okay, you noticed?
I did, but I wasn't sure what it was, and I was like, well, maybe he's just not comfortable. You know, it's a 3 hour movie.
I wasn't comfortable between the sticky floors of the theater. And
yeah, I thought we were in a porn theater. It was really kind of weird.
Yeah, normally we don't review the venues, but I feel like we should for this specific occasion.
This
because
is a big premiere, yeah.
I mean, come on, fucking Harkins, get your IMAX theater together like that.
And that's like isn't that the only IMAX theater we have in this area?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like, hey man, just the mops. It's just a mop. You just got to mop the floors. It's really not that difficult.
You would think for a special press screening on a Tuesday night, you're not that busy.
Right.
You would bust out the good mops.
The good mops, yeah. The bougie ones, right?
And clean water.
Yeah. No.
And make sure the floors are not sticky. And yet, as I'm walking up the steps, I'm losing my flip-flop because it's 120-degree weather, so I had to wear flip-flops. I don't wear shoes when it's that hot.
It's hot.
And my flip-flops were falling off of me as I was walking up the steps.
That's what it sounded like when he was walking towards me into my seat.
Yeah, I had no idea what was happening. I was slightly embarrassed because the press lady that invites us to these screenings was watching me struggle as I was walking up the steps.
It's pretty funny.
Yeah. So, all right. So, Oppenheimer is a 2023 biographical thriller film written and directed by, of course, Christopher Nolan. It's based on the 2005 biography American Prometheus by Kai Bird and Martin J. Sherwin. The film chronicles the life of J. Robert Oppenheimer, a theoretical physicist who was pivotal in developing the first nuclear weapons as part of the Manhattan Project and thereby ushering in the atomic age. The film stars Killian Murphy, Emily Blunt, Matt Damon.
We're going to be here a while.
And Robert Downey Jr. No, I'm only going to focus
I was like, we're going to be here a while.
On the main ones. Yeah, because it is one of those films that
crazy cast.
Has a giant cast. Josh Hartnett has a big part to play. Love that guy.
Yeah.
It seems like his name, though, has gotten lost in a lot of the marketing, right?
Yes, it has. Yeah, it's almost like he disappeared from the entire cast of the movie.
And he's a
very large part of the movie.
The opening 2 hours.
Yeah.
He was pretty much front and center. Kind of lost the character a bit towards the end because of the nature of the story. But yeah, during all the press junkets, the red carpet, I hear nothing about Hartnett.
Well, and this is one of those casts, guys, when you go see this film, that you may not know everyone's name, but you'll be like, shit, I know that actor. Shit, I know that actor. It's one of those casts where you're like, it's so deep. It's so deep with people that you've seen in other things and just fabulous actors and people that are very good at their craft. And you're just going to be like, wait, I know that person. And there's a lot. The cast is insane.
Yeah, that's usually the case, right, with these types of films.
Dude, Nolan doesn't mess around when he casts people.
It feels like everyone in Hollywood tried to audition for this film.
Yeah. Well, I read an article where Matt Damon promised his wife that he was going to take a break. And he said the only stipulation with that when he talked to his wife is if Christopher Nolan calls.
Yeah.
And we know how that.
I saw that too. I started laughing.
So it is. Yeah. I think he doesn't play around when he casts people for his movies. And this is no different.
Yeah. Now, just so everyone is warned, there really aren't spoilers.
We can't spoil. This is history.
I mean, guess what? The bomb went off.
Yeah, guys, we dropped 2 of them.
They were successful. Mission accomplished.
Yeah.
There could be some plot aspects that we might reveal, but nothing that would ruin the movie. It's not really that type of movie, right?
No, it's a biopic. I mean, like, the thing is, guys, like, if you know anything about this, or if you Google, like, it's going to give away the whole movie anyways. So, yeah, spoiler alert, we dropped 2 bombs, Hiroshima and Nagasaki. They worked. We won World War II. So, you know,
welcome to the history part.
Well, yeah, welcome to the history part of this. You know what, though? I knew this is my favorite era, World War II era, like, as far as history goes. And I didn't know a lot about Oppenheimer. I mean, I knew about the Manhattan Project and the 2 bombs and things like that, but I didn't know a lot of the ins and outs of the story.
Like his struggle,
right?
Like post.
Yeah. So I didn't know a lot about that. So it was really kind of refreshing to see that side of it.
Yeah.
And learn about the guy that basically changed our civilization forever, essentially.
I agree. In fact, I saw that Instagram post that you put up, the stories.
Yeah.
Where something about Googling a character right after a movie. And I did the exact same thing because as I was watching the film, I realized, man, I really don't know much about this guy. I thought I did.
Yeah. And so I'm not even going to lie. I posted that and I laid in bed for at least an hour and a half just reading through the Wikipedia, like just kind of clicking on stuff and going through and reading and it was really, really interesting. Some of the stuff that was in that Wikipedia. I mean, typically Wikipedia is hit or miss, right? But this one was really in depth, and it was really neat to kind of, see the movie and then look. The whole story is fairly accurate, so it's very interesting. How they did that. But yeah, I don't normally do that. It was like an hour and a half of me just down a rabbit hole.
Exact same thing. All right, so let's just get into it. This movie, drum roll, please. Might
did that work?
Possibly be Christopher Nolan's best picture.
Ooh, wow!
Seriously, and while you're watching, it's hard not to notice that you're watching the work of a master artist. That's what it felt like from the very opening minutes. Something takes control. It grabs you.
Yeah, I think the thing with Nolan films in general, because I've seen almost all of them, except for some of like the really early ones that.
He did one prior to Memento that I had not seen.
Yeah, and I think when you sit down and you realize what you're seeing and who the director is, I think you're in for like an experience. Like not just
That's a great way of saying it. It's an experience.
It's an experience. It's not just visually, it's sound, it's the way the movie's shot, it's some of the shots that he did in the movie, which is not something I normally look at.
It's hard not to appreciate it.
Yeah, and I think for something, I would say this is up there for me. I mean, I still personally think Inception is one of the better films he's ever done. So yeah, that's just me.
Listen, Inception is a fantastic film. There's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah.
I think as being a film enthusiast, just take into account everything that he put in a film like this.
Yeah, of course.
I don't feel like the typical Nolan fan, and maybe that's where you're coming from, will react to this film maybe the same way I have. There are similarities to his other films stylistically, but this is a far more nuanced, methodical character study that relies heavily on the psychological.
Totally agree. So I think I'm coming from a aspect of like maybe more inclined towards adventure and action.
Yeah, which he does great.
Which he does fantastic. And I think that's where I'm looking at it. But as far as a biopic, almost verbatim someone's life and some of the shots that he utilized in this, yes, I would say you're on track for sure.
Yeah, I felt like the film worked on every level. I would be surprised if this film doesn't rack up Oscar nominations.
There's no way it doesn't.
In every category?
Yeah, every category. Actors, the film, the sound, everything. Dude, like, it is going to win a shit ton of awards. I'm just going to say that now.
So you keep mentioning sound, which I like that because I feel like sound was one of the best aspects, or one of many great aspects of this film. And you mentioned experience as well. Now, there was an interview that Nolan had done, I want to say, just a couple hours ago.
Oh, really?
And he says that he was talking about superhero movies, and he was asked if he would do one again. And he said no. He criticizes studios for viewing films as plot and not an audio visual experience.
I think people literally forget the audio portion
Yeah.
of audio visual experience. Like there's some scenes in the movie where if you interpret them, they are atoms splitting, chain reactions happening, and the way he feeds them in cuts of like normal, like it's obviously it's a montage, right? But he feeds them in areas where if you're a normal person, you're like, why is that there? And then subconsciously, the sound that comes along with them is so. I'm trying to think of how I want to explain this because it affected me watching those
the sound assists.
Yes. So sound assist in that montage because I mean, without using a better word, it is a montage. It assisted in what Oppenheimer, the character, was doing.
You're exactly right.
And one of the things, obviously, I am no theoretical physicist. I don't know anything about astrophysics.
Really?
Other than yeah, I know I appear to be really smart, but other than like, I understand what a black hole is. I understand in the beginning of what he was doing, like Oppenheimer was doing. I understand what he was trying to find. But other than that, that's where my fucking theoretical physics goes out the window.
Yeah.
But as a normal person watching those scenes and watching this, for a lack of a better word, atom splitting and these chain reactions happening, you kind of feel like you understand what's going on, and it's the sound that goes with them, and that adds to that experience in that montage where you're like, okay, he's in your head, you go through this headcanon of like, okay, he's splitting atoms, he's working on trying to find a black hole and this theory of black holes, and then like his, that's where he starts, as we get to start. And I think that those scenes with the sound added to them added to that experience.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the sound was. I'd love to know what that actually was.
This is going to be one of those movies that when it comes out on Blu-ray,
I hope
you're
there's
going to
extra
have
features.
to you're going to have to dig through those extra features.
Absolutely.
Because there are a lot of interesting gimmicks and old style tricks that were utilized to make certain visuals pop and work. So it is one of those movies. And as I was watching, I was trying to figure out some of them. Like, okay, how did you do the fire? How did you do the explosion? Did you poke holes through the film to create some of those effects?
Yeah.
And we'll get into that more when we start talking about the CGI. But first...
Or the lack thereof.
Right, exactly. What element for this movie was your absolute favorite part?
I think for me, I think Killian Murphy, man.
Mm-hmm.
I want to say, I think Killian Murphy, and then obviously the Trinity test. That whole portion of them showing the test and everybody getting ready for it.
When they built the town.
When they built the town, and then they did the test of the bomb.
During hour 2.
Yes. But as far, during hour 2. But Killian Murphy is unbelievable in this movie. That dude, Cillian, however the hell you say his name.
I'm not even sure.
I think it's Cillian, but he is going to win an award for this movie. I would be fucking shocked. Pardon my language. I'd be fucking shocked if he didn't win one.
So the website here says Killian Murphy.
Oh,
I have never heard it pronounced
I've always
that
heard
way.
Cillian.
It's a hard K.
Oh, well, Killian. All right. Killian Murphy. All right, fine. I hear Killian and I think the Running Man, but whatever. He's a bad guy in that. Never mind. Whatever.
I know who you're talking about.
Okay, cool. Because I love that movie. I think he's superb in this movie. I think he is the character, which is hard to say when you do a biopic or whatever. Like, he is lost in that character, J. Robert Oppenheimer. It is the scenes where he is, I guess I would assume that's a mock, or not a mock trial, but like a,
the farce.
The
farce trial,
Yeah, and just watching him answer the questions, and one of the things that I really noticed too is just the way that he holds himself, his body language, his, I read an interview with him. He said he smoked so many fake cigarettes he'd be surprised if he didn't have fake cancer, like because he smoked them on Peaky Blinders as well. So it's just his mannerisms and the way it envelops the character is unbelievable. And I think that's one of them. And then the other aspect was the test, like the overall. how do I explain this? The overall I was actually nervous. I didn't tell you this, but when they were doing the test and it was counting down, I could see how that whole thing could be nerve-wracking. 2 years of plutonium and uranium.
And also that the fact that there's a near zero chance that you could blow up the world.
Yeah, near zero chance you could destroy the world. So it was like I actually got a little nervous watching that scene, which
isn't that cool?
That's so cool, dude. That doesn't happen in a lot of movies, man.
Yeah.
So that whole thing was interesting. And one of the things I also did, and I don't know if you did this, but that camera that they have in there that's shooting the explosion, it is a real thing. So you can go and actually look at that footage of the first bomb going off, and they did a really good job of being pretty fucking accurate.
So same camera, same
everything. Like, and the footage that you see is obviously the mushroom cloud and the explosion at night, because it was at night.
Mm-hmm.
And but that was I was pretty surprised by that, how accurate it was.
Yeah. For me, the greatest achievement of the film is the characters, the acting, and also the seamless nature behind Nolan's use of space in relation to the subjects within the frame. And the countless moments where what you call diegetic sound was used to amplify a moment of extreme tension. And for those that might not know what diegetic sound is, it simply refers to any sound that originates from the story's fictional world and is heard by the character within the film. So, for example, they did this a lot, but there's one specific moment that was just so powerful. There's a particular scene in the film where they're building a town to conduct the nuclear test.
Right.
And the hammering of nails and the construction sounds are used all around the performers to ramp up the tension.
Yeah.
There was a lot of that going on.
Yeah.
It was clearly designed for psychological purposes, and it worked in a really big way. There's moments like that throughout the movie. There's banging of doors. There are books being dropped on counters.
Yeah.
And every time
That's
it's
ambiance.
done, it's used to increase the level of intensity.
I think the best analogy to that, if you're kind of at home wondering, one of the movies that I relate that to, Mike, is Saving Private Ryan. Towards the end, when you hear the tiger tanks,
yes,
but you don't see them, and you hear the tracks, and you hear the treads, and you hear the clunking and everything, and it creates that tension of knowing, holy shit, these things are coming, but you can't see them. And I think, I guess now that I think about it, they ramped up a lot of the audio outside of what was going on, and it made you almost feel like you were there. I think also too, in IMAX, with how ridiculous the sound is in IMAX, you almost felt like you were in the scene with them, right? Like, and I guess
especially with those screens, just how big they are, how it immerses pretty much your entire area of sight.
Yep.
That you can see, you're seeing just that screen. So psychologically speaking, what it's doing to our brain, and then you combine that with the sound, we feel, for all intents and purposes, we are in the scene.
Yeah. How at what point are we going to just start shooting movies in VR where you have to sit in a 360-degree theater and experience a movie, and you'd have to watch it 17 times to see every angle? Like, you laugh, but I know
different perspectives.
Yeah,
like you choose to watch this portion.
Yeah,
because that's all your eye can see.
Yeah, and you have to turn in a 360-degree to see the whole movie. I mean, at some point it's going to happen, right?
Well, if there's nude scenes, I'm only going to pay attention to the nude scene.
I mean, you're never going to look anywhere else.
I'm only going to watch Margot Robbie films after that.
Jesus Christ! Did it throw you off that there was a sex scene? I don't think it threw me off. It just kind of, I was like, whoa, boobies.
It shocked me.
Yes,
because the woman's titties. Let me be more. Let me be more professional.
No.
The woman's boobs.
Oh, come on.
Were bigger than my entire body.
They were massive on the IMAX screen.
It was an IMAX screen. And my hat is off to Florence Pugh. Is that how you say her last name?
Pugh.
Florence Pugh.
Being naked on screen.
For willingly being so vulnerable.
Yeah.
When your body is going to be
IMAX
projected on an IMAX screen.
I mean, look, I thought she looked good. I thought she looked good in IMAX. At being 47 foot tall in front of me, but
there's no amount of money that would get me to do that. There just isn't.
Yeah, but like, you can't show ding dongs on screen, so it's like, you'd be fine. It's not an NC-17 movie. They're not going to see your
You
wiener.
can show peen.
They're not going to see your wiener, dude.
Well, if I tuck, they won't.
Would you fuck me? I think I do. Yeah, I do. Hats off to her for.
It was a little off-putting. Going back to your original.
Yeah,
your original question.
I don't think it like took me out of it. I just didn't expect it, and I think that's what kind of threw me off a little bit. But I also it didn't take like it added to the story. You understood.
Yeah, there was a point to it.
Yeah, there was a point. It wasn't just gratuitous, nakedness, but it was like whoa, and because it happened, like it was a scene and then boom, boobies, and it was like whoa, okay, all right. But otherwise, I mean, like it didn't take me out of it. It just threw me off at first.
Yeah. So sticking with acting here for a moment, let's talk a little bit more about Matt Damon. We pretty much covered Killian Murphy.
Yeah, whatever.
He was outstanding.
Amazing.
I mean, just that's all we can really say. Outstanding as Oppenheimer. And if he's not nominated for every single fucking award, then they're not watching this movie.
No.
Matt Damon is a scene-stealing son of a bitch.
Dude, he's so good. The thing is, he plays the bravado military general that's seen some shit better than any person I've seen in a long time.
Yes, and the reason why it worked is because he's more of the serious, straight character of the film.
Right.
But when he becomes too serious, he offers the typical Matt Damon quip that's used for levity. This joke, comic relief. Because almost every scene he was in, he was serious, and then it ends with a comedic moment. He says something funny that really makes you. I don't want to say. It doesn't make the character endearing to you, but it does make you like you're drawn to him.
You're drawn to
the character. And I wasn't sure what they were going to do with that character because I wasn't familiar with the history of the character, if he was considered an enemy of Oppenheimer later down the road. But the way they ended up handling the relationship between
the two characters,
I felt worked because you got to a point where you felt. I don't know if that was the effect because I know Nolan said there are no. What was his wording? He did not want to present any value judgments on Oppenheimer. He said that history has already done that. His point of the film was to present a perspective and the facts.
Right.
And that you, as the audience, can take away what you want from it when it comes to the ethics of the character. Yeah. But that being said, because we're watching this man on screen, it's kind of hard, and he's the protagonist. It's kind of hard not to be drawn to him, to root for him.
Yeah,
and you wanted these other characters to rally behind him. And as the movie progresses, he loses friends, he gains unsuspecting allies.
Yep.
And Matt Damon ends up being one of those. Emily Blunt as Kitty Oppenheimer was perfectly designed as a supporting character. That's how a supporting character works.
Yep.
Her scenes really helped.
She's really good.
Yeah, it helped the audience grasp various moments as well, various key moments, because Cillian Murphy's Oppenheimer wasn't the most talkative. He was
very quiet man,
introspective. You can tell he was thinking a lot about everything. Even prior to the bomb, he was a man that was. It seemed like they were presenting him as a man that was stuck in the clouds. He was a dreamer, of sorts.
Yeah, absolutely. He was someone who knew. He knew how to do.
He knew things.
Yes.
And he wasn't quite sure how to prove said things.
Well, and reading more about the man in reality, he was a very quiet man. He definitely wasn't over the top or, extroverted type character. He was very introverted. And I feel like, honestly, though, great minds like that, people who are very, very intelligent, very smart, are normally like that.
Yeah.
Almost, if you will, on the spectrum of autism. And I mean, I don't think he was, but and I don't know for sure, so don't quote me on that. But I think, you have a good turn of, this character is going to be a friend. Oh, they turn out, like there was a lot of ups and downs and like I want valleys and peaks of characters changing. You feel for them. Oh God, this character is a shithead. Like, there was a lot of that. And
when you're dealing with the potential annihilation of an enemy.
Yeah.
you're going to have that. You're going to have people who are like, yeah, let's do this for the science of it. Let's do it. And then as you get closer to the bomb being a reality,
It's
suddenly reality sets in.
Yeah.
And you have people that, I don't want to say they turned against him per se, but it's people who ended up having
Changing their mind.
vastly different opinions.
Yeah, but the thing is, you understand every angle, you understand every opinion,
Yeah.
because when you start looking at it, you're looking at, for the lack of a better way to describe it, an absolute point in our history as human race where our human race changed. It changed everything, the way we think, the way we act, the way we handle ourselves as governments do. The atomic age changed the human race forever.
Yeah.
Forever. There's no going back. You can't go back. And I think when you look at these other characters and you look at their opinions on the whole situation,
that's what seemed to motivate a lot of their intent, right? Like all of them were very much aware what they were on the cusp of achieving.
Right. We're creating a weapon here. Right. And I think that was the big thing when they got close towards the test and everything, you start to see these people be like, well, we're creating a weapon of mass destruction. And
that was actually something that I found the most interesting when it comes to historical facts, because again, I wasn't entirely 100% up on Oppenheimer. But one aspect that I thought was very intriguing was that he was actually for building this bomb when it was about killing Nazis.
Right.
But you find out that the bomb wasn't even finished and the Nazis had already lost the war.
Yeah. I didn't know that.
So Oppenheimer's beef was he did not want to use this bomb on the Japanese because that was never his intention. He wanted to use the bomb on the Nazis.
Germans, yeah.
And once the Germans were... I mean, I believe Hitler had already died.
They already suicide.
Yeah, they already mentioned it. I think they mentioned that moment in the movie, and he felt like we don't need to do this. The war is coming to an end. We don't need to drop the bomb on the Japanese, and that was the point of contention. That's where the film shifted the tone, where he did start to lose certain friends. People turned against him. Some people joined him. He also started having a lot of
regret,
remorse. He was also unsure of certain things, whether or not they should do this. And that was an interesting element, because even though Nolan didn't want to present any definitive value statements from his perspective, he did present, based on the book that this movie's based on, he presented a perspective of Oppenheimer based on interviews and news. I mean, he spent the majority of his career after the war writing legislation that would prevent these types of weapons.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting thought. I mean, you start thinking about what, as a person, you start thinking about what they actually created, and it's what do we constantly always talk about when there's any type of nuclear war, World War III, like, they change the world. And I think when you start looking at those different angles and those different characters switching and everyone kind of switching sides or whatever, and their opinions and being remorseful, or it's very interesting. I personally did not know that the Nazis had surrendered. I mean, I guess I could have figured that out, based on the timelines and when the bombs were dropped and when Hitler, like, you could kind of, it's something that I never really looked at.
But it definitely, knowing that little bit of history, it changes
the way you think about it
completely.
Yeah. And I think, it changes the way you think about it. It changes, the thought process. I mean, the scene where they're all sitting there, the president's not in there, and it's all those generals and everybody, and the pilot's there, and they're talking about dropping the bomb. And then, the guy makes the joke, well, we, vacationed in Kyoto and it's a beautiful city.
What a doucher.
What a douche, by the way, what an absolute, I was like, oh, you son of a bitch. But that, just how almost, I don't want to use callous and whimsical, oh, we're about to drop 2 bombs and kill thousands of people, or hundreds of thousands of people, and not just with the initial blast too.
Yeah, and that, I liked how they did all that, and I don't want the listeners thinking that it was a platform piece, because it wasn't.
It's not.
That's the interesting thing about this movie, is that it just presented a lot of different moral perspectives.
It's not an agenda piece. They're not pushing an agenda at all. It's just,
you're dealing with a movie that's dealing with a highly philosophical and complicated situation or scenario that happened in our history, in recent history. within the last 100 years.
Yeah.
And it's a complicated situation that no one will ever definitively be able to
Have the right answer.
and say, was that the right answer, or was that the right decision, or was it the wrong decision? And that's pretty much what the film was doing, was walking that line that there is no definitive.
Yeah. Well, it goes back with the same, they used the whole Prometheus, stealing fire from the gods and giving it to man. They used that as, kind of their basis of what Oppenheimer did.
Because Prometheus was punished by the gods. Oppenheimer was punished by
his country.
Yeah.
And so I think that, that's a very, very good thing because, or at least the way they perceived it using the Prometheus fable. And I think when you sit down and look at it, you never we could have lived without fire. But at the same time, we needed fire. So it's a very good analogy to what happened to Oppenheimer. And I think, you're never going to know the right answer here. Atomic bombs are terrible, but atomic energy is good. Mm-hmm. So it's like you got to take the good with the bad. Unfortunately, the bad in this portion is, the most destructive thing that known to man. So,
right.
Dude, it's such a moral quandary.
And it's also morbid. There are moments where they're delving into some of those aspects, some of those moral implications, and they show you the I guess you could say it's the suffering that Oppenheimer was going through, like his guilt and his remorse, because there was these really gruesome moments where he would see people's faces start melting, which is essentially him visualizing what happened to the Japanese people when the bomb went off. Now, one person we have not spoken about yet is Robert Downey Jr., who played the most unexpected role.
Yeah, I did not see that coming.
He was essentially the antagonist of the film. Yeah. I mean, if you could say there's an antagonist, he was the face of that. He was the petty Louis Strauss. And I didn't know much about this man, but I went online and started reading a bunch, and apparently they got him right. He was a bit of a D-bag.
Just a petty little
petty
shithead.
Coward a bit, wanted his own, notoriety.
Yeah.
Was somewhat
probably jealous of Oppenheimer. Yeah. That's how it always works,
and
dude.
I believe Robert Downey Jr. will get nominated as well.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if he didn't.
Yeah.
I did not expect that. I didn't know what his role was going into the movie, going into seeing it. And that was definitely something that I did not foresee. But I mean, wow. I mean, he did a great job.
Yeah. So the writing, I want to get into just a bit.
Okay.
Oppenheimer is the first script written by Christopher Nolan in the first person. And this part is important to fully understand what the movie was doing from a technical standpoint. Nolan wanted the narrative to be conveyed from Oppenheimer's perspective.
Okay.
He had also deliberately chosen to alternate between scenes in color and black and white, explaining that he wanted the film to be conveyed from both an objective and subjective perspective. Elaborating upon the dichotomy of color and black and white, he elaborated that the majority of the film would be the color timeline of Oppenheimer's subjective experiences, while a more objective view of his story from a different character's point of view would be present in the black and white timeline. So there's the differences. And it would have taken me probably a couple views to understand what he was doing with those different moments, those color choices.
Yeah.
If I had not read that, I probably wouldn't have figured it out for a while. And it does make things a little more clear to me.
Well, it makes more sense now, yeah.
Watching the movie, I feel like a lot of audiences have come to expect that black and white represents the past.
Yeah, I mean, so that's...
If you're doing both, color and black and white.
Yes.
And that threw me off. And this is coming from someone who watches tons of films.
Right.
It actually complicated some of my viewing and comprehension because of the color choices, because I was not sure what I was watching until the end. I was uncertain. When did this scene take place, and how does it matter? Why does Oppenheimer look older here, but it's in black and white? Now here we are with a color sequence where he looks younger. I wasn't sure what was happening until the end. And if that's the intent, if that was Nolan's intent, that
Yeah.
we wouldn't really understand
Until the end.
where all these different moments take place until the end with that reveal, then it did work, because that reveal is important. It has to
Yeah.
do with the Robert Downey Jr. character,
Right.
when everything comes to a head.
I was a little confused too. I think the overall timeline of the way the movie is presented to you was a little confusing.
Isn't that most of Nolan's movies, though?
I feel like, yeah, I mean, like, fuck, watch Memento. I mean,
He loves non-linear storytelling.
Yeah.
And sometimes it works. It absolutely
yeah, I have
works.
no problem with it. It just
And
can
sometimes
be confusing.
sometimes it doesn't. And
Yeah.
that's where I have my biggest problems with Nolan's work. Even when you look at The Dark Knight and Dark Knight Rises, there are
Yeah.
moments where he breezes past entire time frames, and then he expects
you
us
to
to
understand.
follow and realize, oh, 9 months has passed, and
Yeah.
we don't really have an idea. He does a lot. He takes a lot of liberties.
He's expecting you to know, and I think
Yeah.
it didn't take me out of the movie. I just assumed that we would understand at the end, which we did. But I am under that impression that when you see black and white, you think, okay, this is in the past, right? But one of the other things that I interpreted that whole segment is, I've watched a lot of history stuff, and like back in the day when there was the Red Scare and all the Communist Party and everything, and you always saw those hearings of the person sitting there and defending themselves that they're not communist, was always in black and white.
Right.
And I assumed that that's what the vibe he was going for when you had Downey Jr.'s character sitting there being, under that review board or whatever it was. I assumed that that's the vibe he was going for with the black and white, because back then on the TV it was always in black and white. That's just what it was. Every
Right.
every.
So you think for authenticity purposes,
Yeah,
is
I
what
think
he originally was doing. What
That's
you
what
had
I
thought.
Yeah, that's what I thought. And then now that you say that,
Doesn't it make more sense now?
it makes way more sense now.
Especially because there are color sequences. For example, when Oppenheimer is, when he is being questioned during his private trial, there are moments that are black and white.
Yep.
And then towards the ending, those same scenes are now in color, and they're way more personal, which is
personal,
obviously
yeah.
the subjective
intention,
intent.
yeah.
So now that I know this, I'm like, okay, I would like to go back
And watch again.
make sure I empty my bladder out and rewatch.
Right, just do it at home so you can pause it.
And no sticky floor theaters.
Well, I mean, I hope your floors in your house aren't sticky, but that'd be weird. But hey, man, whatever.
But it would bring a lot greater understanding, I want to say, because and maybe this is just my mind stuck on Nolan's writing, because I really love Nolan as a director. I think he is probably one of the best directors in our modern age.
I totally agree.
Without a doubt, he is.
No,
but
no
I
ifs, ands, or
do.
buts, yeah.
If I had to nitpick him, it would be his writing.
Yeah,
I'm not a big fan of his writing.
I think for the purpose of this movie, this is one of the reasons why when we do our score, the nonlinear just was a little confusing for me. And I'm not the smartest person, but at the same time, I feel like that nonlinear, that like 3/4 of the movie doesn't make any sense, and then the big reveal at the end is like, oh, now it makes it makes sense. Sometimes takes me out of it, where I'm like, okay, what? And I feel like for me, it's a hard pill to swallow.
Yeah, and maybe another problem I have with the writing, maybe it's possibly more clear to me now after reading that interview that I mentioned at the top of the show, where he says that the studios are more about plot and they don't want to accept that films are an audio-visual experience. I'm more in line with, I'm not saying I agree with studios necessarily. I probably am more in line or the same mindset as the artists themselves.
Right.
But I do believe in the sequence of plot. And
Right.
Nolan obviously rejects a little bit of that, thinking, hey, you know what? Why do I need to always adhere to the norm? If I know the rules, I can break the rules. And this is an audiovisual experience anyways. So possibly plot is just not at the top of his mind. It's about crafting specific scenes that sell you the idea he's trying to convey.
I mean, look, sometimes you get so pretentious that you just can do whatever the hell you want.
That is true.
Yeah.
I don't think Nolan's fallen into that
No,
yet,
I don't think so either. But
although a lot of directors that are as good as he is do sometimes.
Tarantino.
He's done it a couple times. Yeah, absolutely.
But I think that's for me. I agree with you. I think the whole nonlinear storytelling you have to do it well, or it just doesn't make any sense, or you have to visually make it obvious when the time frame is of when that shot is being shown to the person.
Do you think there will be people who sat through 3 hours just really impatient because of this?
No, I don't know, because I like, even for me, like I'm typically that viewer,
And you weren't.
No, the whole
Okay.
time I was engaged by the movie. I was very interested.
I think you're a good consensus. Actually, the both of us,
Yeah.
because we're different types of viewers.
Completely different. Yeah, and I think for me, like, I was more, because I love this time frame of history, I was more enveloped in the story and the what they had to do to create this, the atomic bomb, and like the things that they had to go through and the things that he had to figure out, and all the team of science. Like, to me, that was really fascinating. So I was very engaged with that aspect of the movie. So no, I think that normally I'd be kind of antsy with a 3-hour movie, like, but I also love this time frame of history. So for me, like, I thought I was borderline learning while I was watching a movie, which is always kind of nice, especially when it's very accurate, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. So we only have a few more minutes. So
Okay.
let's get into the no CGI aspect.
Yes, this was really confused. Like, you confused the shit out of me. And it's one thing I mentioned to you before we started the
'Cause
movie.
I was unaware that the rumor was that there would be no CGI in this film. Now, I was aware of Nolan's desire to craft the actual explosion of the bomb practically.
Yeah.
He did not want to use CGI. So I was aware of that, but I wasn't aware that there was
whole movie.
a bunch of things going on the internet about him not wanting to use CGI. Now, first thing is that Nolan is pretty much a practical effects guy anyways to begin with. I mean, if you go back to Batman Begins, that dude created his own Gotham.
Yeah,
The whole city. Well, it wasn't Gotham. It was the slums. What was in there was a part in Batman Begins where a lot of the fight scenes, I think it was downtown Gotham.
Narrows.
Okay.
Yeah.
That entire thing was built, I believe, in a giant
and then they decided to move to Chicago
airplane
for Dark Knight.
Yeah, I feel like they should have just kept building their city.
You know what? They didn't want huge statues like Joel Schumacher's fucking films.
Yeah.
He's a practical effect guy, and you're pretty used to that.
Yeah, so hearing this wasn't entirely surprising, but I was shocked to hear that there would be no CGI. Now, according to an interview, I'm just going to read it verbatim. In an interview with the Directors Guild of America, Nolan justified his no CGI approach by explaining his stance on the art form. Nolan clarified that while he likes CGI and uses it sparingly, he believes there is an innate, immediately obvious visual distinction between computer-generated imagery and live-action filmmaking.
So true.
Basically uncanny.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he's right. I mean, how often on this network alone do we blow practical effects?
And how often do we say, did you really need to do that with CGI?
No, when you could do it a practical effect for probably half the cost.
Yeah.
I think that the thing for me is in my head, I was very interested to see how they were going to make an atomic explosion without any CGI, knowing what they look like, it was very, very. I was very intrigued.
And as of the date of recording, Nolan has not released any specifics on how
I want to know how he did
that scene was accomplished, but it's only a matter of time. I would assume, based on prior films that do similar things where they make a big, they hype up something they did, usually in about a week, we'll probably see something on YouTube.
I need to know. I need to know if they built a scale model, if they were able to build something that would give them the same effect. I need to know. Like this is the one thing about this movie that I absolutely need to know.
Yeah.
The thing that blew me away, and I don't know if you know this movie was shot in 57 days.
Jesus Christ, really?
Yes, 57 days. I read an interview with Killian Murphy. I used the right name this time. That a lot of these scenes were just the camera, Chris, and the actor. And they 57 days.
I can actually see that.
Yep. And
because it was such a personal film.
Yep.
And there are a lot of shots where you're just on Oppenheimer in an extreme close-up.
Yep. So yeah, very, very quickly shot. which doesn't surprise me, but at the same time, I guess they said that most of the sets were pretty small, other than obviously the big, needed to build bunkers and things like that for the explosion and stuff like that. But otherwise, it was a very, very, very quick.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
that's an accomplishment.
That blew me away. Yeah,
that's management.
Less than 2 months. It's wild.
Wow. So Nolan said the Oppenheimer features 0 CGI shots despite its CGI finishing touches. So yes, there are things in post-production apparently where you go in and sweeten it, but the initial
otherwise it's all
scenes are all practical effects. Now he also says in a new behind-the-scenes featurette, Nolan said for the scene to look believable and nightmarish, which was his goal, it needed to look like real life. It needed to be filmed practically and not with computer graphics. And I will say that the effect of the explosion was exactly what he wanted because there was something surreal about it because it was so visceral. I cannot wait to find out how they did it.
Me neither. I really need to know.
I mean, there's different things. I mean, back in the old days when this was what they had to do, they did a lot of in-camera effects. You can do things like poking holes in the film, which causes light leaks, which then create all types of interesting effects in your final image. There's also things you can do that's also considered practical that you can do in telecine. And telecine is the process where they take the actual motion picture, the film, and they develop it. It's where they do color correction, grading, film restoration, frame rate conversion, aspect ratio, speed changes, cropping, and resizing.
And that's all physical
and
film,
digital
right?
effects.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
And then there's even old school things that I learned back in the old days in film school where you can actually do all types of things. You can take a pen and scrape up the film within the canister, and it also sometimes will create like a fire type of effect.
That's pretty cool.
So as movie nerds, not film nerds, as movie nerds, this is something I have a feeling that a lot of us are going to want to find out.
I think the other thing that I noticed too, and I actually brought it up to you, was the fact that he left a lot of the grain and the weird.
I love it.
Like the little floaties. I'm gonna call them floaties because I don't know the right actual word for them. But you can actually see that there was a couple scenes where I was like,
flickers in hair.
Flicker, and like it looked like flakes, like pieces that were floating on the screen, and I'm like, that's because this was shot in real film.
Yeah,
and
some of those flickers and hairs were bigger than us.
Yes, dude. Dude. I was like, holy shit, that's massive
because of the IMAX. Yeah. Now, it could be also that the film was damaged the moment, because technically the moment you put film into a projector, you're damaging it. So, and when you're damaging it, you're producing some of those. That's why so many hardcore purists like watching old reels, because it has character because of how many times it's been viewed. So that could also be just from the viewing process, like the people who previewed it. But either way, I agree with you.
I thought it was cool.
Having those grains and some of those tangible imperfections in the film,
it added to it. It didn't take me out of it, but I noticed it. And I think it was one of those things where it's like, it almost felt like this movie was shot 40 years ago. Yeah. And it wasn't. It was shot like, a year ago? Yeah. So it's very interesting when that subconsciously your brain is like, I think the other thing too is shooting on IMAX reel, like, full blown 70 millimeter, reel, it adds something to it. And I don't know what it is, but it adds that thing to the movie.
I'm glad we had an IMAX screening.
I am too. I think it would have sucked in regular theater. Not sucked, but you know what I mean.
We probably would have been aware, but the fact that we would have missed out on this presentation, when will we ever be able to see this movie ever again on IMAX?
Probably never. Unless they just do like a special screening, but I doubt it.
Yeah. All right, so let's just move into our final thoughts. If you want to get us started, Ryan.
Yeah, of course. I am probably not the audience that this movie is made for. And what I mean by that is I'm the guy that's pretty, loose with my reviews. I'm the guy that goes in and tries to can get rid of my disbelief and watch a goofy ass movie and like it. But being a history nerd and someone that enjoys the world that World War II time frame of history, this movie's amazing. The choices for the cast are superb. I don't think any single character that was cast in this movie was miscast, which is not normal. I think some of the visual shots, the atoms splitting, the chain reaction explosions that are supreme up close shots, and the sound, and just the overall experience with the film grain and on IMAX, and just overall every aspect of this movie is superb. I feel like for me, I had to really, really think about this movie. Not just because I loved the story. I loved learning about, the atomic age, learning about how they made the bombs, which is incredibly fascinating to me. I mean, it's not very often I go home and Google and go down an hour and a half, 2 hour rabbit hole of just learning and reading about it. I think the pace, the only negative is what we mentioned earlier about the nonlinear storytelling. I think it makes sense in the end, but I think there are going to be people out there that are going to be confused by it. I think it's going to be confusing because, like Mike said, the characters, they're old in this shot and then they're young in this shot, and then it's it's in black and white and color, and it can be a little confusing. And I think that's about my only gripe with this movie, other than it being 3 hours long. But at the same time, I sat there for 3 hours and was completely engaged. I also went pee before, so I didn't have to pee at hour 3. But yeah, I think, just the pacing was not the pacing, but the nonlinear storytelling was a little weird. But otherwise, this movie's superb. And if it doesn't win multiple awards, I will be shocked. I will literally be shocked. So I'm going to give this movie, I'm going to give it a 97. I was thinking about giving it a 96, but the more I think about it, it's a 97. It's a damn near perfect movie. And I agree with Mike. It is definitely top 3 Nolan films of all time, if not number 1. And the dude just knows how to tell a story and give you an experience of watching a film. We'll use film because it's film. It's not a movie. It's an experience.
Yeah. I can't beat your final thoughts, so I'm just going to keep it simple because I agree with everything you said. I'm just going to also copy your score, 97%.
Doesn't surprise me. Like I thought maybe you might give it a little bit higher, but I feel like that once you started talking about the nonlinear storytelling, it did take me out of it. Not take me out of it, but you know what I mean. And
it's just it's become and I want to say, I'm just going to say it, but please don't take it the wrong way. It's become a bit of an irritant with me when it comes to Nolan pictures.
Yeah.
He can't do a straightforward film.
No, I believe started from A to B.
And I love nonlinear storytelling
when they're done correctly.
But every one of his movies are like that.
Yep.
And sometimes it works really well. Inception.
Yeah, Inception made sense.
A few other films that are eluding me currently. I liked Tenet. I know people didn't.
I thought Tenet was great.
I thought Tenet was really clever. How he utilized the.
It made sense for that movie.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Because of the use of time travel,
the reverse world, it all made sense.
Yeah, his nonlinear just worked automatically. It felt organic. So yeah, if this movie didn't have some of those same issues that I typically have with Nolan's movies, it probably would have been 100% for me.
Yeah, I think we're on the same page. But I think it's also interesting too that, when I look at you and me as reviewers, and when we go to a movie, we're completely opposite in the way we view a movie. And I think
we like the same movies, but we like different things.
For different aspects of them. Yeah, and I think for me, this might be the first movie where we're fully on the same page about everything.
Yeah,
and if you guys are on the fence about going to see this movie, don't be. This is definitely something. If you have the option to see it in IMAX, do not fucking hesitate. I think that's the way to view this movie anyways. So there are a couple movies I never saw in IMAX that I regret, Avatar being one of them.
That was quite the experience.
Yeah, I saw it 3D, but I never saw it in IMAX. Yeah. And so
Doctor Strange, Multiverse of Madness was amazing on IMAX.
Yeah, I didn't see that.
Wasn't a super great movie, but holy shit, the experience was fantastic.
I saw Dark Knight Rises in IMAX, which was pretty cool.
Oh, I'm sure.
Ready Player One was a really cool one to see in IMAX.
Oh, I bet. I missed that one on IMAX.
That one was amazing. But this movie is, if you have the chance to see it in IMAX in its full glory,
that's what you need to do.
You have to. There's just pay for the ticket and go.
Did you hear that the canisters, the reels, were some studios, in order to play,
they had to make a room.
They had to it's George Lucas syndrome.
Yeah.
They had to build things in order to accommodate his film because the film reels, the entire length equaled 11 miles.
That just, to me, that's mind-boggling.
It doesn't compute.
That doesn't make sense to me. When you lay out the film, it's 11 miles. That's like basically my drive to work.
Yeah.
That makes no sense.
That's so awesome.
That is so crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you guys get a chance, definitely go see it in IMAX. I mean, I need to go see it again, I think. And I don't say that very often nowadays, but I think I need to see it again.
I was going to take my son, but after that IMAX nude scene, he's too young and hormonal to see it. He's not ready for IMAX boobs.
I wasn't ready for IMAX boobs.
Neither was I. All right, let's close out the show. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you.